You know, I was thinking, do you remember back, some of us that are older, you remember back when when we got those mousetrap games, for Christmas? We'd have to put them all together, and there's always little twists and turns and the little slides and the little cages, and I guess it was the ball, not really a mouse, but it was called mousetrap. I'm sure you remember. I feel like one day I woke up and I found myself in the mousetrap of twists and turns, and not even knowing that I was even playing a mousetrap game to begin with. I didn't know that I was the prey. but I really loved those games. I loved that game, and I also loved oh, the surgical one, where you get the bones. Oh, and it goes, you try to get the wishbone out. Oh, what is it? I can't remember. Oh, rats. But you know what I mean? The surgical one where you could put all the little bones back where they belong. Why am I forgetting what that's called? It kind of felt like that in the last few years too. It's interesting, as I was thinking, what am I inspired to say at this moment? Because honestly, gosh, it's just, I feel like my mind is just so, I don't know. It's heavy. My mind, it's not heavy in a bad way. It's just like so filled with so many different things and situations that, that you could probably speak volumes on once I really slow down and actually write them all down and articulate exactly what those are. But I think the one thing that's really been on my mind that, that I'm obviously not qualified to speak about, because I've been married, a few times. I have, but I do want to talk about relationships anyway, because most of us have more than one or two relationships through our lifetime anyway, so we kind of know, and some of them are more serious than others, and they prepare us for the future. But I was really thinking about how, in the world right now that even my children, my son is navigating, and it's so much harder and different now than it was when we were young, because back then it was pretty simple, there was, most relationships were like girl guy. I mean, they just were. And, there were the other, homosexual relationships too, but you just didn't hear about them as much. And so, you usually when you met a boy would meet a girl, it would be like the whole high school thing, and it would start there. But everybody was pretty much on the same page, right? They were all on the same page. And our goals, in the future, is, when we're done with school, but there was always this underlying, marriage and family, that was really our ideals. We really wanted to have marriage and family. And I think that people still do. They want to have a family, but not as much, it's not as common as it used to be. I think that's really, in a way, that's really sad. I mean, I know they want to reduce the population, so maybe that's a good thing for some people, but I personally believe that, I still have that pretty basic idea of relationships, so I'm still stuck way back there, when relationships, were basically you get together and it was about family. But even as I'm growing up, and as I grew up and was, raising my children, it's a very different world when you're combining families. So as we were adults, we all had, a lot of us had to combine these families. And that was really incredibly difficult, So it's so much different even for my generation as it was for my parents and their parents before them, right? It just seems like society is getting more complicated when it comes to relationships. And and I kind of feel bad for my son. There's all these little new nuances, new words like polyamory. That's got to be really confusing. And and in my mind, it's not healthy. I mean, I'm old school, and maybe teach me something. But for a bunch of people, in my opinion, and you don't have to believe what I'm saying, honestly. This is just, you have to remember, I lived in a different time, and so my thinking is a lot different than, someone that's, half my age would believe. But I do know this. I do know that the younger generation would love to meet someone that they could trust, that really wanted to have those, real, true, affectionate, long-term relationships, if not marriage. Maybe in their dating years they don't or something, but I think ultimately we still do. And it's really sad. I mean, I was watching this lady on a TEDx talk, and I didn't believe her. I mean, she did a good job. It wasn't that. But she was talking about polyamory and how you can make yourself not be jealous when your guy is with somebody else. And I just thought, you ain't fooling me. That's gotta hurt like hell, man. You're trying to tell your other girls, and you can pretend, because nobody wants to be different than the crowd. So if they say like, well, you gotta have a good attitude when your guy goes out and is with somebody else, and you're not allowed to have any feelings about that. Wow. I don't want to sign up for that. Do you really like that? Do you like that idea? Because I can listen to what somebody's saying to me, and there's still that feeling of, counterfeit, because not that they're deliberately doing that, but I know that everybody wants to feel loved and wanted and even desired above any other woman or any other man. They don't want to have to share their girl or share their guy with some, not really, not deep down inside. And we do these odd things in society, and I think we go along with whatever, seems to be the trend at the time. But I know for sure that people don't want to have to navigate their sexual health and thinking that their loved one is, or somebody that they are, intimate with, is out there with somebody else. And you've got to think about, the health, risks that are involved in that sort of a lifestyle. In fact, I think sexual health is a big deal right now. It really is. And maybe I'm just a nerd and I'm just like old-fashioned. You can call me whatever you want. But I think that what I really am is just using common sense. And people say, oh, don't you want a man? Don't you want to be with a guy? But because of all of these different worldly, confusing scenarios with relationships, I'm good, man. I don't want to have to be with people that, are sleeping around with other people and sharing all that with me. And it's not that I'm a prude or anything like that. Maybe I am a little bit, but normal, and it is morals. I do have morals and what I believe is right and what's wrong. But really, when you think about it, it's just, I don't really feel like that with this sexual revolution, it's kind of just got out of hand. And everybody's bonkers, it's like, okay, it's just, I don't even know how you guys navigate it that are younger and you're dating and you're trying to navigate all that. And there's, bisexual people and, which to me is another danger. And it's just, I have a lot to learn about that. I don't think that I'm going to change my mind no matter how much anybody educated me, because I know that there is safety in sexual hygiene. And I'm not your science teacher, but I know that's true. but there's even more to it than that. It's a matter of self-respect, for one thing. But one thing that really struck me as I was thinking about that these days, and with the people that I have met, the men that I've met, there's this tendency, especially with online dating, where they can just and it's true for women too, that you go on these dating sites and there's all these different women and there's all these different men, and so you can just bounce around. But it isn't just like bouncing around to normal date, it's bouncing around to hook up. And that's also something that, I don't know, that's just something that's really unsettling for me. I don't like the idea of having to navigate, You know, what if I had started to have feelings for somebody and they're still likely, and men are more likely, I know men are more likely to do this, where they're just like, looking around, and they're out there doing their own thing, and you're thinking that you're dating somebody to get to know them, when really, especially when you get a little older, you just know they're out there playing around. A lot of them are. They know what the marriage thing is, and they're looking for something else, and usually somebody younger. And so it's just really difficult to navigate the dating world. But there's one thing that I know for sure, and this is me, even though I've had, several relationships, and I've always taken probably too much time in between because I haven't been codependent. It's been a struggle, but I've had such really difficult experiences in relationships that I realized that, until I figure out what I'm doing to attract the wrong kind of person, that it's safer. It's just safer to figure me out first. And I mean, maybe it's just that because of the way that the world is right now, I haven't found anybody to fit what really matches with me. It isn't that I don't want to ever have a relationship. It's just that, I don't want to be with somebody that bed hops. And that seems to be a thing. It seems like, especially with men, I think women, a lot of times we're more sensitive, and we can self-reflect and work through our breakthroughs, I think, differently than men do. I think, we go through the emotions and the heartache and crying it out and getting over it and moving on but then we move on. That is if we had feelings for somebody, right? That we weren't playing the field, we really had feelings in a relationship. But I think men deal with their feelings by just going to find somebody else. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. I think they, it could be. I mean, we could say, okay, well, they grew up with just mothers, they didn't have a dad in their life. We could find a lot of different social reasons why men just hop from one woman to the next. But I really feel like, I mean, and it isn't just me, and it isn't just for women. So men, I want you to really think about this for a minute. And women too, because if a guy has just left somebody, barely left them, and they're already on to someone else, they're bringing all those problems from that last relationship over there to you, okay? And then all of a sudden, okay, you're in competition with the wife or the other girlfriend or whatever, so, and I've been there, done that, okay? And also there's a risk, especially if somebody was married to somebody, that they've got some sort of bond going on there still. So even if they've just left them and they found a new girl, chances are that before they really, are done with each other, he's going to go back and forth. It's just like you learn these things over time. And so as I glean this real life education of mine, it just has become to the place, I've come to the place where I really do value my own feelings, and my own feelings, my own well-being, emotionally, physically, spiritually. I value that, and I don't want to even, I mean, I can date and just be chill. It's not like I'm that serious at the beginning, but but if you go out with somebody maybe 2 or 3 times, maybe you tell me how that goes. By then you kind of know if you want to see that person again, or if they're just multi-dating, And in this world today, I'm more of a Christian. I have that Christian model in my life. I feel like, we need to be responsible, like I said, for our sexual hygiene, our physical health, and our emotional health, because, I don't care what they say. If you are with somebody intimately, in an intimate way, there's a part of you that bonds with that person. It just does. And you may not think so, but it kind of does. It's like you sold the farm, and then they go off to the next thing, It's just, and so, I don't know. I just have different morals, not because I'm Miss Goody Two Shoes or I'm a prude and I don't, and I'm just unreasonable. It isn't about that. It's just this thing with this social media and the ability to bed hop is really creating a society that's really, I mean, it's just something to take a look at as you go along. Because, you know, I know deep down inside, most people do want to have solid relationships. That, you know, I know they do. Really, they do. Nobody wants to share their person, especially if they're agreeing to be in a polyamorous one, pretending just for the chance to be with that guy. Because honestly, honey, you know, we're worth a whole hell of a lot more than that. I would never sign up for that deal. I couldn't sign up for that deal. I mean, it's, you know, maybe it's for some people, but, you know, I don't know. I don't want my tender feelings hurt. I do have very tender feelings. I don't know if you heard. I'm an earth angel, so I've been told, you know, and I really do have very tender feelings. And I intuit a lot. And I feel the feelings of other people really easily. And so much so oftentimes it's really not pleasant for me. Because, and I'm working on that, I'm working on protecting my own energy and my own feelings. But when it comes to navigating these relationships, especially nowadays, I feel like we owe it to ourselves as women to expect so much more from these men. If we would expect more from them, instead of letting them go do whatever they want, and then we're so codependent, oh, please don't leave it, you know what I mean? And I know that a lot of times it has to do with children or family, you know, but your guy shouldn't be manipulating you and making you feel insecure in the first place. And you shouldn't be making him feel insecure in the first place. You know, you're kind of a team, especially if you're in a marriage, right? And so nobody should be making each other feel insecure. That's a big red flag. I don't like that. But see, I've been through all of these different scenarios enough to know what's right for me is not that. And so until I find somebody that's kind of on the same page, you know, that really is, you know, somebody that doesn't have that need to be the player. I mean, player's gonna play, and it's an ego thing, and maybe they're insecure and they need all these ladies to make them feel like they're somebody, which is really too bad. But it also is, I feel like, a psychological little crack in the, I mean, everybody has cracks, okay? We all have our problems, right? But this one's a big one because it doesn't just affect the people that they're with, because it's gonna, you know, if they're sleeping around, it's gonna be like a group, and it's gonna just kind of like everybody's spreading their essence everywhere to be kind about it. But you know, it's something to think about. And I just, you know, I am just trying to convey a possible, you know, some thoughts that might be more responsible in protecting ourselves against people that, you know, play the field and they're not really concerned about your feelings. They just want to hook up. And how are you going to know that they're not hooking up? There's no really way to know, unless you, maybe it's over time. That, you know, and it comes back to this thing that's respect, remember? Respect and trust. That, you know, I think a lot of us, including myself, have given our respect and our trust to people that we really don't know that well. We think one thing, or maybe even they deliberately make us think this one thing, right? But that's not really, but they know they've probably, because they've been playing around like this, because they probably have porn addictions, which is a big deal these days, you know, you have to really figure out who you're with and what you're willing to deal with. And that's really important. And I don't know, I'm inspired to tell you this because, you know, right now everybody's like, you know, she just doesn't want to be with anybody. And it's not really that. That's not the point. So I've explained the point. The point is that I don't sleep around. I don't feel the need to do that. You know, I made a decision, even though I'm not in the faith particularly anymore that I was in before. I did in myself take an oath that, you know, I was going to be morally clean. And that means something to me. And in my eyes and in my spirit, I feel like that increases my value tenfold, because I care about my body. I care about, you know, who I'm with. I respect my future person to respect myself. So there's lots of different reasons. And I promise you, if more people were more willing to really put that value back into themselves and to be particular and not so flexible. Let's just put it that way. Because, you know, your heart is precious. And truly, I feel like this problem with, you know, jumping from one person to the next, even if you don't have any intimacy, this, if you, and I understand if you just date somebody one time and you move on to somebody else and then you move on to somebody else and you've only gone, you know, once, maybe twice with somebody, that's a little different. But if you really kind of get involved with somebody, but then you're still hopping around, that's where I feel like there's a real breakdown. You know, there's never going to be a time of real settling down, unless of course you know, you actually leave him and then he'll come chasing you. I know that for sure. If you leave the guy, he'll be coming and, you know, begging you back. And then, but that's not really how you want to do it either, because then he just feels threatened and he's coming after you because he doesn't want to lose that stable person. But it really, in the long run, he doesn't really respect her to be there in the first place when he had the chance to do all that in the first place. Does that all make sense? And so I think, you know, if we want better relationships, we're going to have to start expecting a lot of a higher standard for each other. Expect more. Don't be afraid to say, this is what I'm like. This is what I expect. If you don't agree with that and you have a different, you know, view of how you want to conduct yourself in these relationships, you need to have that conversation as you're getting to know each other. I feel you need to know where that person's coming from. You know, and I've had, you know, in fact, I think people that were not in the church that I was in, were better at this than the people that were in the church. The singles that were in the church that I was in, they were terrible. They were terrible. You couldn't count on them. They would just hop around, and maybe they would stick with you for a while, and it's not all of them, but it was really, really common. And so, and you know, and as you get older, like I said, you know, it's like it's harder because maybe you're past your childbearing years, you know. But I think that's probably perfect because your kids are older and there's not that dynamic where you have to combine families so much. You know, that's kind of been done. And hopefully you're mature enough to like each other's kids. But I just, my standards have changed. My standards have changed. I feel that is appropriate for the way the dating world is right now and keeping me safe. I know where I stand, you know. I don't want to have any regrets, you know what I mean? And you know, we all make mistakes, and there's always a chance that you're going to get hurt. You know, you could fall in love and it still falls apart. But at least, you know, you did your due diligence, and you know, there was something there that brought you two together, and you stayed there for a little while. But you know, we're all in this for a learning experience. That we are. Still, the way that the world is right now, you know, our physical bodies, the health of our bodies, it really does matter. And I know this revolution where people are getting to, I mean, I've heard, so through this whole thing, do you know how many times I've heard about these orgies and people, groups getting together for intimacy? I don't, my soul aches, and my soul just, it just like is revolted by it. It's like, really? Because I just don't, I don't understand. I really just don't. It's just not in my, and I don't want to try. I don't want to change that perception or that feeling that I have inside that tells me that that is irresponsible behavior, that I know as an adult that it's creepy. What you want to do is fine with me, just, you know, it's just not for me. And that's fine. We all are different, right? But at least I'm going to make sure before I get myself involved with somebody, I'm going to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I get myself all hooked up and emotionally involved with somebody that's just going to wreck my life. And I know that they're going to wreck my life. And that's a big deal. It really is. I just, you know, And I feel like, you know, there's some people, they're a horse of one color. They're never going to change their colors. You know, they have probably created some peculiarities in their life, and they're probably not going to change their mind later on down the road. And so, you know, those are the things that we need to make sure of before we really get hooked up with these, you know, potential partners, because, you know, once you're with that man, everything changes, right? And it's above and beyond even the narcissism thing, because that's just another element. And usually these people that are non-committal, that are players, typically have a narcissistic tendency anyway. Maybe not all the time, but pretty much. I would bet that would be true. Anybody that wants to do that research, let's do that. Maybe I'll do the research, do a little query, you know, do men that are narcissistic when they're single, do they tend to, you know, do they tend to be polyamorous? Do they hop around? Probably. I don't know. But that really isn't even the point. I just feel like that, you know, if you want something better, you have to be better yourself. You have to, and it really isn't worth it. You need to be okay with the possibility that you will never find somebody like that. And still, you have the memory to know what it's like to be with one of those guys, and you never want to do it again. You know, yeah, learn my lesson. And so it's not the end of the world for me, because I already know what that's like and don't want to do that. So if I don't find somebody that matches me, that has the same kind of moral compass that I have, then I'm not going to waste my time. I mean, I might think they're cute and I might like them, but if they're never going to be anything but a player, I mean, I would rather them pass me over, because that's not what I'm about. I want more for my life, especially now. You know, it's like I've already done this. If I do this again, if I ever get involved with somebody again, it's going to be something real. I don't want it to be anything that's mucked up from the past, mucked up from betrayal. You know, that's no way to start. It really isn't. I want something that's, you know, respectful. That's something I deserve, and something he deserves. And, you know, so that's what I'm going to end with. That I want to be the kind of person that is respectable. I want to attract the same kind of person that I am. And so I'm going to emanate and be just that. And hope, you know, if I find that, that's great. If I don't think I'll be upset. I think I'll be okay. You know, so that's my message for today. And, you know, tell me what you think. Because, you know, I do try to understand other people's points of view. I doubt it's going to change my mind on this subject, but I feel like at least it would give me understanding. But I know in my heart, just from speaking to my son, what his expectations are. And I still think people want to get married and have somebody that's a real team player, somebody that they can depend upon, you know, and have a family with, that hasn't just been with everybody in town, that really cares about themselves and has those moral values. I think maybe not, I mean, he's not religious, but he believes in God, and he's such a good man. And he's not any kind of a prude at all. Not at all. However, I just, you know, it's hard to navigate this world right now with everybody just hopping around and being with multiple partners. And it's just, you know, it's hard to know how to navigate, you know, and I feel like, you know, it's a matter of just really valuing yourself enough to ask for what you want and expecting to get that. And if you're not getting that from who's in front of you, you move on. Okay. Have a wonderful evening. Let me know what you think. Bye-bye.